Why is shame such a powerful emotion? How does it affect us mentally, physically, emotionally? I'm Nadia Davis. I'm a mom, author, attorney, and Kundalini yoga teacher who has experienced public shaming that brought me to my knees. On this podcast, I'm going to tell you how I'm living the work, taking shame out of the shadows. I'll give you real life advice and skills to take away with you throughout your day. You'll hear from powerful guests who have overcome trauma and emerged stronger than ever. You too can ban the shame within and around you. Join me. You are not alone. Hello, everyone, and welcome home. Welcome to a place where we learn that we all deserve a safe place to share, cry, and be vulnerable. And we know that if you can't find that place outside you, you can create a space within. I call it home, and it's something that I hope to teach my children through their own mindfulness practices. And today, as the sun is like right in my face, it's kind of apropos because Diego could tell me the angle of the sun and whatever else might be blocking it at this very moment. I am interviewing my oldest son. It is his third, and so I encourage you to check out episodes 3 and 5. In episode 3, he talks about his quest for truth in his way, and a lot of other things that are just great. And then in episode 5, he mentioned how he thinks that the first step on any healing journey is like tapping into innate curiosity, something that we all have, that curious child part of us can be the stepping stone to kind of diving deeper or simply practicing mindfulness in any given day. Maybe saying, oh, I wonder how many thoughts I'm going to have about my cat or whatever it might be. If there's more serious things and, you know, you're going through heartbreak or something, that innate curiosity can be a tool to create some mindfulness. And so I'm super excited that Diego is here because the last time I talked to him, he was sharing with me his excitement about his astronomy class and his study of exo-planets. And so, Diego, how are you? And what on earth are exoplanets?
Hi. Um, I'm doing good, first of all. College has been great. I've been like pretty busy, but I would call it good busy because I'm doing things that I really love. Um,
Say
I
more.
midterm season, uh, and I'm going to be doing research next quarter with one of my professors. Um, and I exoplanets. We're observing them.
Oh, wait, hold on,
Or
hold on. Say more by the semester being stuff you're doing stuff you enjoy more.
Hmm?
What does that mean?
It means uh, I'm involved in classes and activities, and I'm surrounded by people who uh, and what are aligned with my interests and my goals. And I feel like I'm putting myself in a place where I have a lot to learn and the most to gain. Um, I've been learning more and more and more that uh, just asking can really get you a long way.
So, joy to you or enjoyment now in school means what I'm hearing is like connection and connection with people that have similar interests and also support for your interests.
Yeah, and also the environment and the classes and the topics being discussed are all. I would also use the word alignment. Everything is aligned
Okay.
with with what I want to be doing, and the things that I value. So yeah.
So yeah, so that's a really good point to make, that, enjoyment, and at this time in a 20-year-old's life, that to really fully be present and enjoying it, that friends, classes, subjects have to align with who you are and what you're interested in, be in alignment. And so you're feeling like you're more in your element. You're allowed to embrace Diego and who you are.
Yeah, I think
More.
that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay. I
Do you
wish
want me to?
you
Sorry.
yeah, if there's anything else more you want to share on it. I mean, Diego worked his butt off. He worked so hard in high school, and of course I want to brag here, but I mean, he did all accelerated classes. He had many different college acceptances, opportunities and offers, and when he walked on the campus at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, it was the feel of the school and the ambiance, that was there, that kind of helped him make a decision. And yet he's a physics major, and so his first couple of years were things like calculus 3 and a lot of just straight out numbers that, you know I guess were you seeing how it would apply to astrophysics, and so did it give you patience during that time? How did you, like, in general, get through the less directly related classes?
Um, I mean, all of it was a baseline, and excuse me, to an extent, I like have to get through those classes. So part of me was like, oh, it's a part of the journey. It's
Okay.
a natural sort of progression. And I also was teaching myself like, or I kept reminding myself, like, think of this boring equation, but the numbers mean something. Like the numbers are real numbers or something like that
Oh,
instead of
I see.
abstract ones. And so that would help me a lot. Is
So, like,
like,
if they were
mm,
applied to something that you're studying, like you're gonna tell
hmm
us you're studying now.
yeah.
Okay.
And so,
And did that come from you, or did the teacher kind of
no,
say, or you just
I
had
mean,
faith?
sometimes it's the teacher does a good job of bringing up those connections, but oftentimes I just have to remind myself.
That's
Um,
great.
uh, yeah, I mean, sometimes the connections aren't as obvious, but like
Mhm.
when I look back like a year later and I'm like, oh yeah, like I do remember that thing from that class, or like I do know about that. It's like suddenly it kind of contextualizes everything and brings me back, at least after the fact. It helps me appreciate it at the
So
least.
he's talking like required classes, prereq. So
Mm,
math versus applied math is what
hmm
he's getting into now. And so to walk through the grin and bear it of the actual math, the hard stuff, you kept telling yourself, and you had faith in the fact that then later you were going to apply it to much more interesting stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Okay. So what are you applying to now? What are these exoplanets? Where you took that picture of you in front of a telescope. He sent me a photo, and it was so cool to see it. It was just so cool. So tell us about that.
So I'll start with what exoplanets are. Exoplanets are a term for any planet that exists outside of our solar system. Um, and so we're great at cataloging everything within our solar system. Like we know the 8 planets, we know all the comets and moons and asteroids and whatnot. But once you get outside of our own solar system,
Mhm.
things get a lot more complicated,
Okay.
and a lot more
So Diego was
mysterious.
talking about things outside our solar system.
hmm
How often do we think about things like that? How often does the average person driving on the freeway or getting up and taking their kids to school think about the fact that there are planets outside of our solar system? And question, does that put the slow driving car in front of us into perspective? Does that, I mean, this is like surreal.
So
Okay.
I think a question that a lot of people think about
Mhm.
is, um, do aliens exist, or are we alone in the universe? Those are kind of two of the same question. And discovering and then trying to learn about planets outside our solar system is like one of the most direct ways that we can begin to answer that question.
Okay.
And so I think the average person, if they know that planets outside our solar system exist, might pause for a moment and wonder, you know, th- there is a possibility that life out there exists, or there's more to our universe than we may think, or um, there's still a lot we don't know.
See, you're
Yeah,
passionate and so interested in space that you have an ingrained level of mindfulness, in my opinion, and perspectiveness. And I remember you said, you said science is um, inseparable from spirituality, was something you said, and philosophy. But this type of science, like this type of literal fact that there's these planets beyond our solar system that are being studied, like in it of itself, can provide a source of spirituality and mindfulness. The unanswered question, yet the curiosity in all of us to know what on earth is out there, and are there other living beings? Just tapping into that, I think, can be a source of mindfulness in a meditation, to
yeah.
then slow it and then observe whatever thoughts are coming in. Just that.
At
That's
least
all.
for me, yeah, yeah. At least for me, those kinds of like big existential questions or like thoughts that I have in my head will sometimes like trivialize whatever issue I'm dealing with at the moment. Like if I'm annoyed at the traffic, I mean, obviously I can't like conjure this thought up. Like sometimes it just happens, sometimes it doesn't. But occasionally I'm like, like in the big scheme of things, this is a blip in my life and a blip in the universe. So traffic doesn't really matter that much when you think about it. Uh,
So
in the
how
in,
do
in Yeah.
you how yeah, that's a good example. I know we're getting off the subject of exoplanets, but you can use it for the same thing.
Hmm.
So you have this, like, not only innate curiosity, but this innate perspective. And how do you think, um, you know, you're doing it like that? You'll just suddenly think of what you're studying, and it'll put something in perspective?
Sometimes, I think being like in the environment that I'm in really helps a lot with that sort of thing because I'm like
Mhm.
reminded of space like all the time. Like
Mhm.
for the average person, the best reminder of space every day may be the moon in the sky. But that's like such a mundane thing that you're not really thinking about like the scale of everything at the same time.
And most people take that for granted.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so I don't know. Sorry, my headphones are dying, so I have to plug them in.
That's okay. So, okay, is this exoplanets on in your astronomy class?
Yeah, so that's a good example.
Mm,
I can talk about exoplanets, but also I'm literally observing them. So in my astronomy class, we have a little observatory on campus. That's where I took the image that I sent to you, the picture. Um, and it's a decent telescope. It's strong enough to uh, look at stars, like dim stars. Decently dim. And my project for that class, it's a project based class, but also lecture, is to observe an exoplanet. And so
mhm,
the way that we do that is, when an exoplanet passes in front of its host star, it blocks a little bit of the star's light, kind of like a solar eclipse from the
Mhm,
Earth's perspective. It's like that. Um, Obviously, the solar system has to be straight on from your perspective, like from Earth, to see that.
mhm.
But if we see the dip in the light, then we can determine that an exoplanet is there, and then we can do things like, oh, like when does the next dip of light happen? We can figure out what a year is for that planet, and then the size of the light dip, we might be able to figure out how big the planet is or something like that. And from there you can determine all these cool little things.
Oh my gosh, it's blowing my mind. And so when you said the star, when it's going in front of its
Hmm.
star, so are there more than one stars that you guys are looking at with more than one set of a solar system in that galaxy that you're looking at?
So what our understanding is that most, if not all stars, I don't want to say all stars because there are probably some that don't,
Mhm.
it's very common to find planets orbiting stars. Each star has its own solar system. And so that's been like a huge revelation in the,
So folks,
yeah.
every star and the ones that we see looking up at the sky at night, each of those are stars.
Hmm?
They're not comets or other things necessarily, and that's right?
Uh,
And each
it's
star
complicated. Yeah.
has planets that are encircling it.
Hmm.
And so we're so far away, we don't see that or realize it. It's just the light that has traveled.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, it's literally,
yeah.
it's so far away that you couldn't even like, the star is so far away. Our sun is shaped like a ball, right? It's a big rotating ball in space. The star is far away enough that it just looks like a point in the sky. There is no shape to it. There's no like way we can resolve uh like how big it is just by looking at it. It's just some light. It's a point of light. And so the only thing we can do is look at the nature of that light and whether that light changes. For the most part, there are other things we can do, but in
And
the
so
context.
how are you through a telescope, you're looking straight at the stars
Mhm.
and you're seeing if it changed, and explain that.
The star will change. Okay, we have these machines that read very, very precisely the amount of light that we're receiving from a star. It's like
Okay.
it turns the this sort of abstract thing into a number. Technically, it's not abstract; it's the number of photons. But yeah, um, and so we can be very precise. We can look at the number of photons, this number, and we can watch as that number decreases or increases. Um, it's not something you can see with the naked eye. You have to use instruments because of how far away it is. Um,
And this is through a telescope?
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um, and so and that number shows up, and there's a variety of numbers, I assume.
over time, yeah. Mhm.
And do you know when a star will be blocked, or
Oh,
and
that's
how
the
long
thing.
does it last? And, like,
Depends on the
how
planet.
many
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
So if it's a star that has never been observed before, or it's not in any database, then you would just have to get lucky. You would just have to look at the right star at the right time of the night and observe it for long enough to notice the change in light. Um,
so
that's
you
kind of,
have
yeah.
picked a star that
Mhm.
you're observing.
So our star, we already know an exoplanet exists around it. It's already, we used catalogs as a
Okay,
reference, like established, published data. Um, so we don't have to do the work of randomly finding a star in the sky and then observing it because that
okay.
could take way too long, like way too long. Um,
But there's people that are doing that
People do that as
in
their
our head.
job. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah. We're here to just go through the process and follow the steps.
Do we know how many total of exoplanets have been discovered?
It's in the thousands right now,
Okay.
but it's rapidly growing. The problem was for a long time, it was really hard to observe them um, because exoplanets are much, much, much smaller than their stars, right? I mean, even our sun is an excellent example. I believe that in our solar system, let me double check this.
So, folks, that is, I'm sorry, I'm saying
Yeah.
folks, but this is in my head the most grounding spiritual fact that anybody can use to begin some mindfulness is this sheer science that when you look up at the sky at all of the stars, those in and of themselves have planets going around them. And that is the like infinite number of possibilities in this infinite universe that we've barely tapped into in our own space research and exploration. And anything else is interpretation in our head. And everybody has a different mind, a soul and a different body. And I'm just suggesting when you sit down, if you're trying to meditate, just kind of pretend like you're looking into our solar system. And then there's all these other stars around with their own planets going around it. And know that that is a fact that cannot change. It's these unknown questions. The planets are out there. And then you're sitting inside your body with a mind that has variations and feelings and thoughts and all kinds of things. That is one way to have mindfulness, is to not take any given thought as fact because it's interpretation. I don't know if that made any sense, but um, this isn't about God. This is about science facts. And I think it's helpful. Okay. So there's over thousands of exoplanets. And so have you made one your friend?
We've made two our friend.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, so I couldn't tell you their names offhand. It's typically a sequence of three letters and then a bunch of numbers. They're not very inspiring names. Um, like I think one is TOY, five different numbers after that.
What would you name it?
Oh,
You can tell me next time.
yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Um,
We're going to name it.
are you asking me what they're like? Because we know a little bit about them.
Sure.
Uh, the TOI one in particular is has we have some good data on it. It's a exoplanet called we call these types of planets hot Jupiters. They're like really big um, uh, planets. They're gas giants,
Mhm.
very very close to their host star, and so they block out a lot of the star's light. But they also go around the star. They orbit it very quickly. So like over the course of a
Mm,
few days. So it's very easy to observe them because
I
the
see.
change in light is big, and they repeat their cycle very often.
Mhm.
And so it's a big old gas giant, probably larger than Jupiter, um, and it for this planet. Let me double check if it
So
is.
you were able to already um, assess based on the numbers of the photons
Mm-hmm.
how large it is. And is that when
No,
you
I'm using established data
okay,
for my reference right now.
but
Yeah.
how did they got to it from these instruments
Hmm.
in the telescope?
Yeah.
So they measure the photons. I
Astronomers
have
are
no
really
idea.
smart. about learning as much as they can from as little as they have. Um, yeah.
Okay.
So
Wow.
the planet is
Based on
called,
patterns and what
yeah,
they've
yeah,
seen before and
yeah.
okay. So we
The
haven't thought out of the box necessarily of the
uh
pre-established.
it's constantly changing.
Okay.
One of the biggest drivers for like new techniques and change and new discoveries is bigger and bigger telescopes. With the launch of the James Webb Telescope, the new one with the like hexagon mirror thing that maybe you've seen,
Mhm.
um, it's like the next Hubble telescope. It's going to replace it, be like the biggest new thing. Anyway,
Mhm.
with that telescope, um, astronomers have already developed a new technique involving exoplanets. That telescope is strong enough to look at the light reflected off of the atmosphere of those exoplanets,
Not
um,
just the star
not
itself.
just the star itself.
Okay.
And from that, we can determine the chemical composition of the atmosphere using the light.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just the okay, explain say more, and then I'm gonna ask you a different question. So you mean the way the light moves, the density, like how
So
what do you mean?
when light passes through material, this is like crash course physics. When light passes through material, uh, it uh, it can be absorbed by the material depending on what the material is. Um, Certain
I
wavelengths of
see.
light, and so when you take like a, you know how sometimes you'll like hold a prism up to light and it'll show this like rainbow
Mhm.
spectrum. So we do that, but with oftentimes light we can't see, right? And some that we can't see. But when you pass that light through an object or through a gas or a material or something, uh, the the object or the material really likes or gets excited by some of the energy, because light is a carrier of energy, right? Energy affects matter. It's like heating up your stove. Like that energy has to come from somewhere, um, or like a mirror on a hot day, right? That energy carried by light affects the material. That effect we can then see because the energy doesn't reach us. It gets absorbed by the material. So you'll see this big, wide rainbow, this spectra, and there will be black lines in it. They're called absorption lines. And so depending on the lines, because
Mhm.
each material is different, every single atom or element has a different set of lines. It's very helpful.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
we can determine like, okay, there's a lot of oxygen in this atmosphere, there's a lot of carbon, etc., etc.
Oh, wow. That
Mm-hmm.
is so cool. So you've studied those light reflective patterns and which material
Yeah,
it
yeah.
would look like.
That's a well-known. So once we discovered that that was a thing that light did, we cataloged every. I mean, we have, it's well established. Yeah.
Okay. So the human body and the materials it's made up of, we would literally be able to see the photon reflection, or we see it all the time of human body deflected light, right? Like would we be able to look up or know what we are? How light reflects off of us. So
So the light would have to pass through us, and some of its energy would have to be absorbed by us. We emit our own light. That's what
so
infrared
if
is.
we were being observed,
It's possible. I mean,
I'm
yeah.
just trying to put it out that we were made. Sorry, mom's going to get all infinite here. But we come from that light. Like we are made from this stuff that Diego is studying. Out there in space there was light and it moved something or reflected off something, and somewhere along the way, the human DNA or the life on our planet came to be. And so I just think that that's the one given truth of our true selves. That anyway, so if there were materials that you can map out on the on the reflections, you would know if the planet has the proper materials for living, for life.
So that's the next
That's what you're
step.
studying. Okay.
Um, it's hard because like the existence of certain materials doesn't automatically guarantee that life is there. We can get an idea. What
Hmm.
I think what we're trying to do currently. This is like cutting edge research. It's really exciting. Um, Astronomers are trying to find what are called like biosignatures. We use Earth as a reference, and we say, okay, what elements exist in our atmosphere that wouldn't be there without life? Um,
Hmm.
and so I could be wrong on this, but I believe oxygen is a good example of that because it's highly reactive, and unless replenished by some source, trees or plankton, for example, living things,
Hmm.
some chemical reaction, it will kind of deplete on its own to a certain level. Um, and so, if we were looking at another planet around another star and it had high levels of oxygen in its atmosphere, we could then say that might be a sign that there's some chemical process happening there, which could be life.
Hmm.
And so that's where we are right now. Yeah.
That's just fascinating. That's just fascinating. Okay, with knowing the bigger spectrum of reality that you're studying, that your eyes are on, and that these whole groups of people are investigating and looking into. When you think of you and your peers, um, how do you feel about the world today?
That's a big question. Uh,
How do you how does your generation, how do you feel about the world today? And you know, what do you wish, the people that do care about you and try to help, what do you wish that they knew about your concerns with the world today that isn't understood?
uh, I uh, the world itself, uh, I think, has a long way to go until we're all happy. Um, I think that's a given that most people can agree with. Um, but specifically, I think a really practical way that we can start to get there is if people did a little bit more research on what they like to talk about, um, or
You
rather,
mean on your generation, what you
I
like to
mean
talk about?
everyone. I think if everyone was a little more educated on the pressing matters of the world and on social issues and on a little bit of science, like I think climate change is a good thing people could understand, like the science of that. Um, I think a bit more of that would do everyone a lot of good.
So are
Um,
you saying you feel that the world in general um is detached from the real issues they should be caring about?
no, I think people care. Um, I just think it's really easy to want to argue for something out of like a personal attachment to that thing rather than a like true understanding of the situation. It's really easy for people to be reactionary to events or to uh, political stances or to
I see.
policy and things like that. And I think if everyone, it's a lot easier to quantify in terms of things like climate change. But
Mhm.
if we wanted to go into the realm of like the queer community, LGBTQ rights, which is a big problem, a big pressing thing for people of my generation, then I think a little bit of sociology or psychology could help the average person to understand like what is gender, like why is gender on a spectrum, what is gender dysphoria, what happens when someone is not provided with gender affirming care. Just little things like that I think could go a long way to help people contextualize like what is exactly going on and what the debate is on in the world.
So, one concern that you have when looking at the world is that in general, there's a lot of apathy, misunderstanding, um, judgments made on lack of information, and is that what I'm hearing?
I think that kind of sums it up. Yeah.
Okay, and so when you're when you're thinking about the future, if I asked you how do you feel about the future, um, with this, say it in a nice way, with this judgment based society that isn't educated enough about the real humanness behind these issues, how do you feel about the future? So you're saying you wish that people with strong opinions about those matters, climate change, LGBTQ, um, would educate themselves more
I just wish that people in general would educate themselves a little bit. Yeah.
or not have a judgment at all,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of.
Hmm.
So that's a wish, but you do think that you and your peers, I know that's a loaded question, kind of just feel that there's a lot of uninformed opinion
Yeah.
makers?
Yeah.
Okay.
I yeah. I it's a the fact that people don't know about certain things is like a driving factor of politics in the United States, I would say.
That's so interesting.
Or rather the denial of things is. Um,
And do you think you and your friends kind of think the same? That
I met people from a variety of different opinions.
I mean, think that, like, our generation needs
I
to be
I
more
think
informed.
I yeah, yeah.
Say it. Yeah.
I think
Before making an opinion.
yeah, yeah, for
Inform.
sure. I
Inform ourselves more.
I think informing oneself and
Okay.
asking more questions, just being a little more curious about, especially with
About
regarding
you,
yourself.
about
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
about
Ask
your
yourself,
generation.
why do I think that way and where does that come from? And then extend that to what other people say or what numbers say. And I think that could take people a really long way. I don't have like anything against anyone in particular. If anything, I only have pity for,
So, but
yeah, that's all.
so if I say what worries you and your peers the most, would it be
It
opinions made on
To
lack
sum it
of
up,
information?
yeah, to sum it up, it would be to say that the future of my generation is in inept hands. Yeah,
In what?
inept hands, inadequate,
Okay.
unexperienced. Yeah,
And that's the general feeling, you think?
that's the general feeling, I think. Yeah.
Wow. And so, what do you wish parents would ask you more? to ask you to look your generation in the eye and say, what's really going on, instead of have a label and a judgment. Um, are you saying that there's a worry about an ineptness and uninformed set of decision makers in general in the world? So, what would be the
I
solution aside from educating ourselves and asking questions? You
I
know,
would say to an extent it's okay to have those sorts of harsh like judgments or initial like reactions. I think it's a very human thing to do, and no matter how much you actively try and work on it, it still will come up. It's just we are kind of reactionary creatures by nature. So the most important thing is to just recognize that that's what's happening, even if you're not willing to then take the extra step and question why it's happening. At least acknowledging it is a good place to start. Um,
so what do you wish parents would ask or know is one thing to consider. And then what do you wish leaders would ask and know? You can answer part or all of that in general, and we can talk more about it in the future.
I think with parents, um, whenever your child may do something that's like unusual to you or unexpected, or maybe even something that uh, uh, you don't like, or like some sort of behavior or whatever you find unacceptable, it's complicated, you know. Whenever something like that happens that triggers that judgment within you, always ask yourself, always assume that there's more going on in that kid's head than you probably think. And there is always some underlying reason, some like thing that you can uh, uh, like trace back from that point, that you can then say, okay, this is really what caused this, which then caused my reaction. I think addressing that root sort of concern is
Feeling emotion.
yeah. So this is not from my own life, knock on wood, but um I have one or two friends, close friends of mine, that this is, I think, a thing I've seen a lot just in general, where some young adults, once they get to the point of self sufficiency or independence, will break off contact with their parents as a result of childhood trauma or bad parenting, or not having ever recognized their children's identities or something like that. Um, and so oftentimes the reaction from the parents, from what I've been told, is like very reactionary.
Mm.
It's like, oh, like
Personalized.
it's personalized, but typically it's like it's against the child. It's like, I took care of you, I put clothes on, on you, and uh,
Shaming.
took care of you under my roof, and uh, you should be grateful, and this is immature, and
That's
etc.
shaming. That's
Yeah,
shaming.
it's shaming, and also it's not focused on the source of the problem, which is the parent. The parent should be asking, why did my child feel the need to do this? Right? It's never like, again, the child, kids learn. I mean, kids through adults, to an extent, like, you make bad choices as you learn, but by the time you're an adult and you make that decision, it's usually an informed one. Especially because it's very hard to do something like that. This is not to say that it's easy, for someone to make that kind of choice on the kids' end, I mean, they care about their parents too, even if they were abusive to them. And so it's complicated, and so the parent, instead of being this reactionary, instead of jumping to this reaction, probably
Mhm.
one that they've jumped to before, which is uh, an invalidation of the child's feelings,
Right.
and why an invalidation of why they were feeling that way, right? Not
Yeah, so
wanting
there's
to address.
no
Yeah.
inquiry into what is really going on.
Hmm.
That's the opportunity, is to dive in and say what's really going on.
What's happening here? Did I cause this?
Mhm.
What can I do to change that? For some, it's definitely a moment of catharsis, or sorry, catharsis is not the right word, of crisis.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that moment can either lead people to digging themselves in a hole
Mhm.
where it's like self victimization,
Mhm.
or uh, external blaming, or whatever. I don't have the most eloquent term for it, um, or it's a moment of that offers an opportunity for self reflection.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's relationships are simply opportunities to get triggered and to use them in a way where, if you are triggered, it has nothing to do with the other person. It's their story, their situation. But if you're triggered, it's brought up something in
it's you.
you, and it's an
Yeah,
opportunity to go within and say, okay, what's coming up? And I need to dig deeper. Now, that will prevent projecting whatever's going on onto the other person. But something that was a really interesting conversation I had with Priya was, she was saying, age does not determine um, emotional awareness or
hmm,
spirituality. The age doesn't. And so your reflection on, and your generation on the leaders or the parents is very interesting, because there's a difference between self-absorption, self-centeredness versus self-awareness. And so the more self-awareness that we have, that we grow, whether 90 or whether 9 or 9 months, 9, um, really will determine the reaction. The more self-awareness that there is, the more, when someone says or does something, let alone your child, um, you can not project what's going on within you, and instead use it as an opportunity to get closer to your child or a peer. Um, and all of that self-awareness, all of it in
absolutely.
mindfulness.
Yeah,
So you wish that when somebody does something quote unquote unusual or unacceptable, um, that
something that triggers.
that triggers you as a parent, that
Mhm.
you should, or you should do your best to try to reflect on your own time, what came up first, and then secondly, use it as an opportunity to get deeper, to know what was the cry for love. Anything anyone does is either an act of love or a cry for love, and it has nothing to do with necessarily you as a parent. First, acknowledge what the child is crying for, and
Yeah,
you know then we can get into a place where we can hear the truth, which may be painful things. It may be needing to own up to wrongs and things, but it has to start with seeing the child, or seeing a peer as a whole entire being, and not allowing oneself to get triggered, because that's
absolutely.
you know that's a very, very critical decision for someone to make. And I applaud you for supporting your friend. Okay. Anything else?
Great
That
question.
you
Do you have anything in mind?
No, I just wanted to thank you for giving that thought and that advice.
Hmm.
And just thank you so much. So we heard everything from mindfulness through exoplanets, through giving us perspective, through some advice should a child in particular do something unusual or that we are deeming as unacceptable. It's like dig deeper.
Hmm. Hmm.
I appreciate your honesty and I love you. Everyone, please check out the audiobook and the free band shame tip sheet. There's a lot of learnings in there. Okay. Thank you so much, Diego. I love you so much.
Of a flame that never dies.
You are not alone. If you are dealing with shame and trauma, please reach out to me through my website, nadia-davis.com. You can get a free band shame tip sheet and find out about upcoming events. I'd love it if you picked up my book, Home is Within You, wherever books are sold. If you like this podcast, please tell a friend, leave a review, and make sure to follow me on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sending warm hugs.